Okay, so welcome everyone to the Arborist call. So same agenda as always, kind of a quick welcome, and I'd like to welcome everyone that is on the call and encourage, if you're watching this after it's been recorded, please join us live. Contact us with any topics you'd like to discuss and participate in the protocol discussion. So we typically do research and implementation updates as needed. That's from Zcashd and Zcashd. And then we have a specific topic each meeting today, or multiple in some cases. Today, we're just going to kind of talk generally about NU5 and some of the progress and status of some items related to that. And then we just kind of have a brief wrap up, but we encourage like interactivity during the call. So if you have questions, put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we just try to keep it pretty interactive and lively and make it productive for everyone. Briefly, purpose of the calls, they're bi-weekly calls where folks interested in the protocol get together to talk about timelines, R&D efforts, anything related to design, implementation, new features, potential features, or any unresolved issues. And it's just really to make protocol development more accessible and more transparent to the community at large, so everyone's aware of what might be going on at that level. And anyone can participate, as I mentioned. If you'd like to discuss a topic or you would like to suggest a topic to be talked about, you can just contact me directly via email or through the Zcash R&D Discord server. That would work. Okay, so before I move on, before we get to kind of the main part, was there any updates on the Zcashd side anyone wanted to give? In particular this time? I should ask that every time. Sometimes I just assume not, but yeah, we put out a new release of Zcashd. That was kind of the one thing, kind of a milestone. 440 went out since our last call. But all right, well, we'll move on then. Let me make sure I can see the chat as well. Yeah, so just a reminder, NU5 contains these zips. We adjusted the timeline to reflect some additional work around unified addresses to ensure that one, we accounted for the additional development, we accounted for proper testing and ecosystem outreach and education. But these
that list should include zip 316.
Right. Okay.
Has now been
Excellent
published.
point. Right. Okay. So zip 316 is the unified addresses zip, which Dara just published a few moments ago. But yeah, so that's the same feature set for NU5 that we had proposed sometime back. The timeline we kind of settled on with the adjustment for unified addresses looks like this. This looks, I don't believe I've got everything on this graphic, but at any rate, the scientific review is in progress. Our goal is to cut the Zcashd testnet support release mid-June for a testnet activation of July 1st, and then mainnet activation we're targeting October 1st. So it looks like the first part of this got dropped somehow, or the part about the scientific review. But at any rate, that's ongoing right now. We've already had the spec audit from NCC. Implementation audit from NCC will be done latter part of May. And we're very close to having an agreement with an additional audit vendor to do both a spec and implementation audit, focus more on the cryptographic side as opposed to the software and protocol implementation side. So pretty excited about that as well. Yeah, so this is the list of topics we had. Of course, definitely anything anyone would like to add to this list, we can, but we'll just work through this, providing kind of a brief update and open it up for discussion as we go. So Sean has to drop off a little early today, but he's on the call right now, I believe. So first item we wanted to talk about was kind of Halo 2 formalism, tech report, scientific peer review. And that also includes a security proof. So Sean, you want to give us an update on how things are going?
So the formalism / technical report stuff is going to live inside of the what we call the Halo 2 book. So that will contain not only the descriptive high level like how do you use Halo 2 as far as documentation for users are concerned, but also the construction as it's implemented and formalized along with proofs and definitions for various security properties. And it's that report which is being reviewed currently by, I'm not sure if we ever said publicly who, but Mary Meller. But yes,
Right, we did.
yeah, so that's currently ongoing review and writing currently. There's no obstacles that I see for completing that. So.
And is that published?
No, it's not.
It's not over. It's still ongoing. We're getting pretty close, I think, to having it wrapped up. This is kind of the third partial week we've been working with Mary on it. So we should be getting pretty close. But it will be published. So, okay. And then so the next topic, and also while Sean's with us, Orchard security proof. We had actually talked about this before. So the security proof that Sean's been working on is the one for Halo, as opposed to like an Orchard circuit specific proof. So I don't believe there was one for sapling either, but I'm not positive on that.
Right. So for sapling, we had this we kind of tried to write a proof, didn't really finish it, and I'm not really sure that the security properties we're going for are really exhaustive analysis of the protocol. So this is kind of I think really outside the scope of what we're doing with Orchard. It'd be nice in parallel with obviously our development of sapling and Orchard, if a framework that was more rigorous, a security analysis framework that was more rigorous for protocols like ours, and all the different properties we're trying to ensure could come out of maybe some parallel research of some kind, either from ECC or maybe from someone else. But yeah, just we never really had our goal really for many reasons has been to ensure that Orchard is as similar as possible to Halo 2. And from whatever we differ, we try to write either
sapling, you mean?
Yeah.
Or, sorry, it's to sapling.
Mhm.
And sorry, yeah, Orchard is as similar as possible to sapling. And for when possible, to write a security proof for the changed portions. So for example, Dara has written a security proof for Sensimia, which is the replacement of the Peterson hash. And then also to give pretty detailed rationale and explanation and sort of, yeah, a rationale and an explanation of the design of the changes that we made. And so we've tried to do that and include that in the book as well. So that's it's not in, sorry, that's in the Orchard book. It's a different book, but yes.
I actually think that's more important than trying to do a formal proof. It certainly gives me more confidence.
I would, oh, sorry, Dara, I don't mean to cut you off. I was gonna say, I think starting with that would be extremely great. So all of that sounds like good, useful, especially looking at the diff, and Halo 2 is a broader protocol. You make assumptions, and then spelling out those assumptions and where things differ in Orchard would be really helpful to look at.
Yeah, so most of the diff is in, I think, 245 is the zip that lists the main places it differs, and then all of that rationale is supposed to be in the Orchard book. So if there's anything missing, then that gets added there. Particularly ahead of the second set of auditors coming in, because one of the things that we would like them to be looking at is the rationales associated with the cryptographic choices, to make sure that they're confident that the rationale is sound.
It's 224, I think.
Right. Yep. Zip
Too
224.
many numbers.
Yeah. 245 was, I forget what it was, but it was related to zip 244. I know that in some
It's
fashion.
the 245 is TGs, which is
Right,
not
okay.
in NU5.
Not in the
Can I ask a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
All right. We seem to be accumulating documents. where is the bright line between what sort of specification slash rationale slash proof should live in the Zcash protocol spec versus a zip versus a book versus a white paper, etc.?
So the way I see it is that the zips are meant to be feature delineated proposals for changes to the protocol, that the spec is supposed to specify the current protocol or the proposed changes to the protocol.
Current consensus
as much-
protocol plus
Yeah.
some wallet stuff.
Yeah, and then in as much detail as we can, and that the book is supposed to be there for analysis and understanding of the protocol. It's like an informative thing, not a specification. So there could be mistakes in the book, but that's those are just those. That's the book isn't authoritative. It's the spec and the actual implementation.
Yeah, for the Orchard book, yeah.
Yeah, for the Orchard book, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Sean. I know you had to leave a little early, but I appreciate that
I got a
update.
little more time, but yeah.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
Next.
and the security proofs, we don't normally put security proofs in zips. We only put them in the spec and potentially in the books, just because the existing security proofs are in the spec. So it's the most sensible place to keep them together.
The security proofs that appear in the spec are for like modular components.
Yeah, they're for
Yeah.
components rather than the whole protocol.
Yeah, now there's an element here of like who the audience for each piece is, and to some extent, at least historically, the zips have tended to be the zip audiences tended to be a bit further away from the raw technical protocol level pieces, because like you have a wider audience of wallet developers and exchanges and whatever. You have to be able to pass those and know what it is they need to do with them. So yeah, something like Orchard or Sapling before it becomes a bit of an interesting case where like it's tied in enough with the protocol that it makes sense to do as a diff on the spec rather than as a standalone delta, like something like the transaction formats. So yeah, there's a trade-off there between making it easy to grab what the important pieces are that you actually need to deal with as like a wallet vendor or hardware wallet vendor or someone, and getting the formal specification readable and easily reviewable, which is easier done in the protocol spec. So yeah.
By the way, for what it's worth, I totally understand and sympathize with the feeling that there's like documents flying from the skies and landing everywhere. I mean, you could probably even add ECC blog posts to the mix there, and maybe GitHub issue tickets, some GitHub issues to that list. There is a lot of stuff, so totally open to suggestions of ways to refactor our documentation and on the protocol side of things. So we probably make some progress.
Related to that, I wonder if we had all the time in the world, we would refactor some parts about Sapling into a Sapling book, similar to the new Orchard book.
Yep.
To tidy up the spec a little bit to make it explicitly, here are the rules, and the abstract cryptographic concepts, and then the concrete instantiations of those concepts in the consensus level protocol. And then if you want all of the motivation behind these decisions, here is a Sapling book, and then here's an Orchard book. But also we have pretty good appendices to the spec. So I wonder if we should be moving around stuff in those appendices as well. But I have no concrete suggestion, just an idea.
Yeah.
I mean if we'd used the structure that we're currently using for Orchard, if we'd used that for Sapling, then those appendices would have gone into a Sapling book. So I don't know whether it's a good use of our time to refactor all of that into a Sapling book, but I think this new structure is going to be more tractable for Orchard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we are
hence,
already, for example,
if we had all the time in the world, it would be it could
yeah. Yeah. And for example,
I
like
mean, the spec is
more,
certainly too long,
yeah, I agree on that.
just quite unwieldy.
And we have moved somewhat in that direction with, for example, the Halo 2 stuff is more centered around the Halo 2 book, and then included by reference into the spec.
Yeah, one of the things about Sapling is that a lot of the design rationale lives inside of comments on GitHub issues. And some of it is even actually just evaporated into thin air, and we don't remember. Or we could at least, we don't remember all of it. We could reconstruct it very.
I mean, a lot of it is on our internal Slack, so
That too, yeah.
That's not accessible to the public.
Yeah. So yeah, lifting much more of that into the Orchard book has been an explicit goal of protocol design this time.
Yeah, that's,
I think
thank you.
I think it'd be good to include references from the spec to these other documents and a clear description of what is to be found in them, and particularly around the security
That is a good
proofs.
idea. I will file a ticket to do that right now.
Yeah, that is a good idea. I think actually right now the book might be a little too fluid for us to, like, it might be hard to maintain the correctness of those URLs, but as things ossify, maybe we can do that.
Well, I can file a ticket now.
That's good. Good idea.
I've two other comments. That the first one is that, you know, the spec should be as long as it needs to be. And there's been some discussion on our side that you know, some key elements of the Zcash protocol are not in the spec because it's basically do what Bitcoin did, which is something that I think we'll need to address in the future. And then the other comment is that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with still how fluid all of this is at this stage, even with a 2-month deadline pushback at this stage
so what's
the
fluid
process.
isn't the design or anything like that. It's mostly the write-up. So like I could go through the Orchard book right now and go, oh, we could put that section over here. It'd be more clear what's going on, and oh, we could add a table to clean this up. This is kind of confusing wording. That's the kind of fluidity. It's not more. It's not like oh, what's the definition of the nullifier for Orchard or anything like that. That stuff's pretty solid, and it's in the spec or in the spec proposal. So.
Right.
Okay, when we have seen a fair number of changes coming through. You know, we've been putting together a bit of a list of them, and I know some of them have come out of audits, but not all of them. Some of them are still clarifying or specifying things that, you know, hadn't previously been written down anywhere.
You have an example?
You can see that that's settling down though. I mean, I did publish a new version of the spec 3 days ago, but half of that is just clarifications and typos and stuff. And there was one design decision one thing that was just a mistake, and one thing that where we changed the design decision in the corner case. So it's not major changes at all.
I was going to mention this later, but one of the zips that's missing from your initial list is zip 221 that was amended, I think, about 2 weeks ago to include Orchard. So there have been some rather large spec changes recently.
Let's see. Refresh my memory. What's zip 221?
221 is the
Fly client. Okay.
fly client.
Yep.
That's the word.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah. I mean, just from a process perspective, we wouldn't include zip 221 in the NU5 feature set just from a list, because it's already been implemented back in, was it
Right, but it did
NU4?
need to be
There's a
modified.
modification, yeah.
Yeah,
Modified for the V5 transaction format.
Right.
So if we're talking about things that, for example, we need test vectors for, or we need proof of concept code for, it would have to be on the list.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, so then we should probably have like kind of a separate way of representing that. So the feature list is essentially, here are the proposed features for NU5. That's at least how we presented it, not necessarily every zip that changed as a result of that set of features. So we should definitely have like two
I
lists.
think
Like,
it's kind of confusing because we're going back and editing old zips. We should be making, I think maybe we should be making new zips that say, hey, this old zip is amended to say, or whatever, maybe.
Yeah.
Because like
I mean,
Bitcoin,
we did think in the specific case of 221, I think we decided that it was clearer to amend it.
yeah, because like in 221's case, the zip itself was intended to be extended in this way. This is the obvious way to extend it, and it was audited at the time with that in mind. And so the question then sort of becomes like, are the specs supposed to be living documents that we update as we go, or a point in time set of changes that we have to patch with new zips every time?
I mean, they're intentionally not set in stone. They're intentionally not RFCs.
right.
I pasted a link
working
to
for everyone though. Sorry, Dodger.
I pasted a link to a list of changes that we had compiled as of a few weeks ago, and I believe there's been more changes in the past couple of weeks as well.
Is my screen still up? Is the list showing now? I can.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I didn't know if when I switched on that tab, if it went away or not. Okay.
I mean, I don't necessarily want to nail this or resolve this particular issue right now, but I wanna flag it as something that we are concerned about. It has, I think, and Tor Deirdre, correct me here if I'm wrong, but I feel like it has made our job in doing NU5 stuff for Zebra a bit more difficult, and I think it's definitely something that we need to discuss and resolve before the next network upgrade.
That's fair. I mean, changes like this did happen for sapling as well. But it's kind of unavoidable because you find things when you're implementing.
Right.
So I think this is the crux of the issue. Zip 0 says that there should be a reference implementation in order for a draft zip to be accepted. Now, the word there is should, and I think there needs to be a discussion as to whether that needs to change to must.
What did it say again?
Because
Dodger, a reference implementation should exist or must exist.
It's definitely something I want to get to. We've been incrementally trying to make that more feasible, both with the overtime changes to the way that the NUP style and how we do things there. Because it's not just your lives that would be made easier by enabling that.
So what it actually says is the reference implementation must be completed before any zip is given status implemented or final.
Right.
It generally need not be completed before the zip is accepted into proposed. And we have been following that.
So it's about zip status then, essentially.
Well, I think the issue is that if a draft zip is published before the implementation is done and accepted and planned for implementation into a network upgrade, then there are inevitably going to be changes as the implementation is done.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's fine. So what you're effectively doing is you're writing this, you're writing both the implementation and you're finalizing the zip or the spec at the same time. And that's great when you have a single node team,
Mm-hmm.
when you have only one team creating node software. Doesn't work when you got a second node team, because ideally,
I mean, it works if you have enough time.
it works. Yes, it works if you have enough time. And this is an example, I think, of where a lot of ifs do not line up in the case of this particular network upgrade.
It also only
well,
works.
it's the draft zip submission deadline too, right? That's the coordination point, and it's always been like draft zip submission for review, feature selection, and then the implementation is probably going on in parallel, but there's no specific have it done prior to draft zip. But I think to Dodger's point, you could expect some degree of changes to a draft zip as you go through the audits, as you go through the actual implementation,
and even
so that's
to a proposed
natural.
zip.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Sorry,
I think
what I'm
it's
saying-
I think it's very useful that you are tracking this, and I'm glad you are, because it is a we didn't have anyone else around having to do that, having to integrate with this when we were doing sapling, which is the only other time we've made such a large protocol change to the spec. Obviously, for Sprout, there was no constraints on anyone. We just, I mean, there were constraints on our own team prior to launch, but we weren't working within a bounds of a protocol. And in the sapling we were, but we didn't have anyone else who had to interact with that. So I think it is very useful that you are keeping track of this, so that we can, we definitely need to fold this in to improve the interactions that we do for the subsequent large upgrades, of which there are definitely going to be some.
Yeah, and I just want to be super clear that I'm not suggesting that we change the timeline for network upgrade 5. Like there are two key things that we're kind of laser focused on. Number one is the security of the new crypto that's being deployed, and that's why we're so interested in the security proofs and seeing them and how they're being audited and reviewed. So that's one thing that I think is essential right now. That's super important. The other thing is that we're looking at this. Obviously, Zebra is not in production, but we're looking at it and we're thinking, well, if Zebra were in production, how would this be working for us? And we're spotting things. And it's not. It is inevitable, given that ECC has been the only node implementer in the Zcash ecosystem, that things like this are going to crop up, and it's just a natural part of the whole life cycle of moving to a multi-node implementation. So don't read too much negativity into this. It's just I want to highlight these things and make sure that that we raise them so that people are aware of them, and it's not to try and derail NU5. It's so that when the time is right, after the heavy lifting on NU5 is done, we can then come back and say, right, let's review how it went. Let's look at what worked, what didn't work, and if for the next network upgrade, Zebra is in production, then what do we need to change? Because we'll have to, the foundation engineering team will have to implement things, and it works the other way around as well. Obviously, if we're going to be proposing changes,
Yeah, I would expect that when the foundation implements, say we have another major upgrade, when the foundation is implementing it, they will find specification problems as well. So it won't be
as we have in this network upgrade.
Yes.
Right.
But yeah, let's put a full stop there and move on, because I don't want to derail the whole call to focus on this.
Okay. No, I appreciate the feedback. I mean, I don't know the details of all these. I know some of them look, like Dara or Deirdre mentioned, some typos here and there we cleaned up. But yeah, no, it's great feedback. And one of the things that's on the topic list for the virtual Zcon is like talk about the NUP and along the lines of multi-node NUP, right? If whatever you want to call that. So looking forward to that as well. Okay.
I mean, all of those are more significant than typos. A couple of them are just typos and proofs, but the rest are actual design changes.
Right. Okay. All right, we'll get back to here. So next up, unified addresses. Dara, you want to give us an update on that? I know you just published the zip right before this.
Yes. So based on some security analysis by Taylor Hornby, so we concluded that we needed to protect against attacks due to address replacement. So the basic idea is users commonly check addresses by only checking a subset of the string. And it could have been the case that because a unified address contains several addresses, you can produce a string that is very similar to some target address and is only different in one of the constituent addresses. And so the user might check, say, the first 20 characters or something, and end up sending somewhere that they didn't intend to. So we concluded that so we needed this mixing function, and the security analysis that says that basically if you try to modify an address in such a way that that you control one of the input addresses, then you'll end up mixing the whole address and it will look completely different. There's another potential attack where you can make it look similar to the target address, but and you don't know any of the inputs, but you've sort of forced the user to use a different address type than they would otherwise have done. And that's a little bit more difficult to protect against. So you actually need to increase the size of an address to protect against that attack. And we've included that change in zip 316. The other change that we made is you can have unified full viewing keys and unified incoming viewing keys. And they basically work like the single full viewing keys and incoming viewing keys from Sapling.
So you sort of end up with
I encourage everyone to review zip 316.
Yeah. So you sort of end up with a synthetic key derivation thing where, given a unified full viewing key, you can derive the unified incoming viewing key for it, and you can derive a series of diversified unified addresses and so on. Yes. The other component to this is so that covers like the core spec bit that defines how unified addresses are structured and how they're used. Obviously, then wallets need to have some way to agree on how they actually derive the key trees that feed into these, like not at a consensus level, but at a just a standard level. So if a user has a seed phrase from one wallet, they can import into the other one, and the behavior is consistent. So we have a design for that. We're just getting some feedback from the wallet team is looking into just a few UX questions around what expectations users are likely to have for the way in which a UA will be presented when, like, in the UX, in the kind of UX that they are anticipating this to be used in. because basically the design at this point is basically that we have HD trees for transparent sapling and orchard. And so the simple mapping is, given a seed, you want to generate a UA for account 0. So you derive the keys for account 0 in each of the trees that you're going to use. And then just from there, use those spending keys as the root for the UAs, for the unified viewing keys and addresses from that point. So pretty straightforward, but we just want to make sure that that fits with the way in which the wallet team expects to be using these in their UI.
All right, very good. Questions on unified addresses or progress or anything before we move on? Next one.
Quick question. I think the last draft, I haven't looked at the latest published draft to 316 unified addresses, included the 4-round Feistel network. I think there was a comment about maybe using an existence, a Tumblr function like OAEP. Did you get to see that, Tara?
Yeah, I answered that comment. So basically, there's a rationale which says that so 3 rounds or less of a Feistel network are not sufficient to obtain the security properties that we need. And OAEP is essentially a 2-round Feistel.
I see. Thank you. Cool.
All right. Very good.
Has there what engagement with wallet devs has there been on the unified addresses stuff, and what level of comfort have they expressed about being able to implement it?
The feedback, I'm not sure who else was on the call from the wallet
team. I see
team.
Brad's on the call. If we could,
yeah, yeah, Brad, you should be able to. You want to answer that? I know we've actually the design sprint we had when we kind of came up with this concept, we had some external participants in, but Brad can give you more of a direct update on them.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, during the design sprint, we engaged with quite a few wallet vendors, both like kind of in the Zcash realm and ecosystem, and also some that were, more traditional multi-coin wallets. Generally, they're accepting of the idea, and right now it really comes down to like brass tacks of implementation, right? So in essence, the UX is all about detailed questions. Some of these things like we're talking about with the one-way transform, it'll obviously require some parsing libraries to be delivered for these wallets to be able to do these effectively. But generally the UX benefits, they're widely accepting of the direction that this is trying to go, because the only other alternative is to manage tons of addresses. So it's kind of like you have to do one or the other. And this is, from their perspective, caveat the details, like when we actually started giving them implementation details, they're pretty excited about it. So I'm hoping to get more very soon, as like the draft spec was just released. So like now is the time to really start getting some more feedback.
Yeah. Have you spoken with Aditya from ZecWallet?
Yes. So yeah, we've spoken with him extensively. Yeah. So like when I talk about people like in the Zcash realm and outside of the Zcash realm, like Aditya from ZecWallet would be very squarely like in the Zcash realm, being that the wallet only does Zcash.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Addy from Nighthawk as well, but not to speak for anyone. And Zuko asked, was there any wallet devs on the call? I don't think so today. I know Addy from Nighthawk was on maybe in the last Arborist call. But I believe Aditya from ZecWallet was pretty pumped about the concept. But again, not to speak for him, but.
And they're comfortable with the timelines of when, everything's going to be finalized, and then their ability to develop it between now and mainnet activation.
I haven't heard of any specific pushback given the timeline of a 3-month testnet period, and working with them, well ahead of that. So far, at least the feedback I've gotten has been they were totally comfortable with it.
Yeah, I can jump in a little bit on there too. Like there's been no serious concern about the timeline itself, and most Z address capable wallets, except for ZecWallet, are using things that ECC wallet team are making. So, it's on us to deliver those pieces for these teams to integrate. And we're comfortable with the timeline, and we're in like very close coordination with those teams, specifically Unstoppable and Nighthawk. So timeline on this isn't a concern from that level.
Yeah, we have a detail on the call now. I think I just tried to promote them anyway.
Hey, Steven. So,
Oh, there you go. Okay, I wanted to make sure I did that right.
hi. So, I'm part of the weekly sync up calls with Kevin and Paco on the mobile side. And I did get a preview of the draft. So, I'd like to see more details of how these screens interact with each other. And I think we'll be working on it in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, Dara just published the draft zip 316 right before the call. I think that we mentioned that right before you joined. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like I can go pull the. Is it on the website now, Dara? Probably, I assume. Yeah, looks like it.
Yeah.
So I'll post that into the chat.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, as far as the like, do you have specific questions around the UX that you want to discuss, or because I think the concepts are all in the zip.
Yeah, so only the concerns were around auto shielding. Like, is that going to be manual or automated? And how much time will it take to auto shield? And also if the user needs minimum amount of funds to auto shield to pay for the fees and whatnot.
Yeah. I should probably jump in on this. I mean, those I think fall outside of like some of the spec, and it's more in the implementation. So the SDK is going to be handling all of that. I mean, in terms of the UX around it, I mean, we're going to have an opinionated way that we do this within the SDK, which is, to move funds as soon as possible from, let's call them legacy address destinations. So like T addresses or sapling into what the most recent pool is. And then in terms of like a minimum amount of funds to pay the fees, yeah, I mean, you're going to have enough funds to generate a transaction. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of generating a transaction to go from one pool to another. And I think these will play out kind of at a different level, right? These kind of UX considerations about something like auto shielding, that'll play out more in like our SDK implementations.
Yeah, there's some aspects there of like, yeah, you obviously need like you need whatever is it, 1,000 Satoshis to be able to make a shielded transaction. But if you only have 1,001, then there's not really much point in doing so. So yeah, I think that would be counted as absurdly high fee at Zcashd. So yes,
maybe we need to reduce the fee for shielding transactions.
Yeah, I mean, that is a potential thing to consider.
It'll eliminate it, right? So, but then it would be seriously identifiable at that point. So,
well, I mean, if everyone who's doing auto shielding uses no fee, then I mean, miners may not mind them, but I mean, they could choose to do that. I wouldn't recommend it though. My expectation for this, because there's also an aspect of which I know the wallet team has discussed before as well. So I'm not going to speak for them, but like of if your wallet has like small bits of stuff lower than the fee, how much of that does the user actually even need to know about? Like if they, so and particularly when it comes to dusting attacks, it's hard for the user to manage that themselves, and so having the wallets handle that in an appropriate way, both for privacy and also just for usability, to me at least makes sense. So my expectation would at least be on this kind of thing that and so obviously, from the Zcashd side, we would be doing auto shielding in a similar ways that things like Zec Wallet can behave in a reasonable way there. And at least my expectation would be that auto shielding would not trigger until like at least the amount you're going to get is larger than a fee. So like at least you get like 2,000 Satoshis or something. I would pick as a reasonable threshold.
Yeah, that's kind of the design we're looking at. It's like a threshold amount has to be triggered, which would be somewhat randomized so that it's not fully identifiable. And that generates a shielding transaction, which would happen in a single transaction, preferably, so that users receive their funds as soon as possible. Yeah, so it's like some of those considerations where, you know, there's definitely a few pieces that are in flight, but a lot of it is very can be very iterative, if you will. So like getting UAs right can't necessarily be iterative. Like we just have to get it right. The exact shielding protocol that we want to use in the SDKs, we can be incredibly iterative and like kind of experiment with different things and see what users like and see what works and kind of find those rough edges. So that's one of the reasons I'm not like throwing down the exact plan that we're gonna go with in terms of the SDKs. But this is kind of like the loose idea of what we want to try first.
Yeah, and maybe it's the case that auto shielding, you know, happens a little bit later.
I think it'll probably happen in tandem. In fact, I think it'll be in our SDKs before UAs are.
Cool.
All right, very good. Okay, let's see, quick time check. Yeah, let's talk about test vectors and kind of an update there. Strad, I know you were syncing up with Taylor right before this call.
Yeah. So yeah, status of that is, so the main piece that was blocking those was getting all the group hash stuff done, because that's, and in terms of implementation of the protocol, that's almost the most tricky part, I would argue, pulling in an IETF draft. So that's been done, that's been reviewed, that's been implemented and reviewed, and Taylor addressed most of the feedback today. I think actually all that remains on that is mostly just refactoring, so we could probably even just defer that. I think I'll check after the call, but so that can probably be merged, in which case we then have Sentinel test vectors, or can generate them. And then, so I have a draft PR up that has the transaction v5 format generator, which will generate structural test vectors. So not valid at all, it's completely random data, but signatures validate, no commitments are valid, whatever. But like, for testing the parsers to ensure that the v5 parsers are well exercised. So there's a PR up that has that. And the next thing I'll be doing today, so I should have it up today, is the SIG hash for v5, so zip244 will be in that same PR. And then I believe Yingtong is working on the test vectors for like keygen and so on, and so that should be up in a PR pretty soon as well.
All right, very good. Next item, NU5 Orchard Guide / FAQ. Wasn't exactly sure what the suggestion was there, what we wanted to discuss. I mean, we produce a network upgrade guide for every release. That's, you know, it's kind of informative. Here's the consensus branch ID. Here's the zips contained in the NU. We bubble up to that network upgrade guide. You know, anything. It's kind of like, you know, be aware of this. You need to change your procedures potentially. So we try to bubble up to the top in the network upgrade guide anything that would require action, or that, you know, it is probably down in a zip, but we don't want to rely on people exhaustively reading every zip in a network upgrade. So we bubble up, make sure you're aware of this type items. Some of those are just FYI, some of them might require change. And in the case of obviously consensus branch ID, we highlight that as well. We don't have any specific, go ahead, Dodger. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is more about, you know, people who are coming to it new, and who, you know, who haven't perhaps read or, you know, been following the Arborist calls or whatnot, you know,
Right.
have something to refer to. So what's going to change, you know, and, you know, literally things like, is sapling going to stop working, you know, like on the last call, I think there was confusion between UAs and UDAs, which kind of, you know, I think highlights that you know, they're when we start, obviously we're in deep in this stuff, but there are people who also need to know what the implications of the planned changes are for them. I think this is about making sure that there is a place that they can go and say, right, network upgrade 5 is due to happen on this date. What does it mean for me? You know, and that might be wallet devs, it might be exchanges, it might be just end users, it might be custodians. So yeah, just having something that, and I expect it will be a living document that will change slightly, over time. Like, for example, it originally wouldn't have had anything about unified addresses, but then, that would have needed to be added to it. But I just think, because, just to help make sure that ecosystem members are aware of what they need to do and can be prepared.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, so it's a great idea. We're producing like, we do fairly exhaustive, I mean, for just any network upgrade, pretty exhaustive ecosystem outreach. And we target different things. Like we want, a large percentage of mining hash power confirmed they're ready for upgrade, prior to activation. But then, but also, exchanges, wallet vendors, everyone else in the ecosystem. So we put together, just for any upgrade, an ecosystem outreach guide or plan, and we make personal touch points to, so it's like multiple avenues of attack to make sure that that people are aware. We were just kind of coordinating on that ecosystem, rollout for unified addresses and NU5 earlier this week. So we're producing some artifacts that we could definitely turn into an FAQ, or actually it may be planned to have an FAQ as the tail end of those artifacts as well. But excellent idea, and consistent with what we were planning to do, to have a series of partner briefings or whatever you'd like to call them.
Cool.
Yeah, the place that this like, at least in my view, the place this should live is the upgrade pages on Z.cash. So like I posted in the chat the link to the Canopy one, and we have previous ones for every other network upgrade. Obviously with varying levels of detail depending on both the network upgrade and also what was in the ecosystem, status of the ecosystem at the time. So we would have a upgrade /NU5 that's where you go if you want, intended for any audience. If there's like specific things to suggest to putting on there, that would be fantastic to collaborate on improving that linkability, and then how to shout it then out to, like, if you're an exchange versus a wallet developer versus whatever.
Yeah, I think that page, Strad, also, I think it also has like a pointer to the network upgrade guide, if it's the one I'm thinking about.
Yeah,
like one of the links
historically
at the bottom. Yeah.
But we could, for instance, like put an FAQ directly on that page, for instance, rather than putting it outside ways.
Oh, right. Yeah, and I think the more places we put the relevant info, the better. That way, depending on your entry point, you're bound to see it. So. All right, good. All right, very good. So let's move on to test plan. I'll let the team kind of fill in the details, but the idea was we're going to use the basically just update the sapling test process that we went through and leverage it for Orchard. Again, that's kind of one of the benefits of Orchard being as close as possible to sapling. We get to re-leverage a good bit of those tests. But Dara, I think Sean dropped off. Dara or Strad, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so we have already an automated test suite that we run pretty much in every Zcashd release, at least, that like exercises a bunch of the logic, the functionality that Zcash does. So Zcashd has, as Paul participants may be familiar with, we have the unit tests internally. We have the RPC tests that treat Zcashd as a black box and do like a private network to do quite comprehensive testing of things. And then we have this test suite, almost a black box, yes.
Gray box.
Gray box. And then we have this automated test suite that we run that uses real money on real and testnet tests to exercise a bunch of functionalities. So extending that to it supports Sprout and sapling currently, and along with transparent, and so it does a bunch of different, like checking that all the kinds of transactions work for instance. And so extending that to Orchard will then exercise a bunch of the is pecuniary the right word? Yeah, the monetary effects of the Orchard upgrade. And then I think for sapling we also just did a bunch of like, you know, spin it up ourselves and poke at it kind of things, which that was a bit more informal. That it would be good to shore up. It'd be also nice because I know there is a ZOMG grant at the moment for setting up like a testing framework between nodes. It'd be really awesome to collaborate with them, like while we're setting this up, to figure out like what kinds of functionality that will enable that could be leveraged for these kinds of tests to make them more efficient or easier to run or whatever. I think they're mostly focused on the peer network, but yeah, it'd be good to collaborate.
Yeah, we'll need to make sure that the network protocol implementations are compatible, because there are some of the things that aren't mentioned in the spec, but are critical to forming network consensus as distinct from block or chain consensus. So we've been testing against testnet and mainnet, but yeah, this is a good opportunity for us to make sure that those things are working before Zebra is in production and before we maybe do some network protocol upgrades after NU5 on both sets of nodes.
All right. Marshall dropped a note in the chat too. You know, we've got the testnet in a box infrastructure, so you can spin up your own multi-node testnet with whatever combination of nodes you wanted. Doesn't have to be on the testnet. That can be done whenever anyone wants to. So.
Although the testnet, the extra 2 months that we added, most of that is after testnet activation. I'm correct.
I see.
So
say that again, Dara.
Most of the 2 months that we added is after testnet activation, and so
well, we slid the activations for testnet as well and mainnet, so there's still a 3-month period. Although I'm not sure I understood what you meant, so I'll probably.
I didn't think that we slid the testnet activation by 2 months. So I could be wrong.
Yeah, the activations moved by 2 months, like all of them, both of them.
All right,
yeah.
I'm completely mistaken then. Sorry.
Yeah, so there's still a 3-month testnet window. It just starts, you know, July 1st. So
yeah,
July.
We can use July 1st. But we can use things like testing in a box to simulate those beforehand.
Yeah,
we'll do it as soon as we can, actually.
Yeah.
After the release
right.
with the testnet height is.
I think our
so go to your
on the Zebra side of things, we actually haven't been testing on things like testnet in a box or very small networks. So we still have to put some work into making sure that Zebra will work with, say, 1 or 2 other nodes, rather than working with maybe 8 or 10 as it gets on testnet, or hundreds as it gets on mainnet.
Right. Okay.
And that reminds me, we need to make sure that there's sort of consistent mining power on testnet during the period in which people are wanting to test.
Yeah.
That was a problem with sapling.
I think we either for Heartwood or Canopy spun up some additional miners ourselves just to have a consistent level of hash power on there. Marshall would know, but I think we did that because you pick a testnet activation height, and then everybody jumps onto test, and it gets here the next day as opposed to like a few weeks later. So.
Yeah, the height that you choose has to be far enough.
Yeah, it has to be pretty consistent. So.
But if you have a fairly beefy mining rig on testnet before you set the height, then
right,
that would improve things.
All right. Okay. Very good. And then, okay. So last item was pool.
Sorry.
Lifecycle.
Well, just while we're still on
no, go ahead.
test planning, I just wanted to clarify some things about the test vectors. So a lot of the test vectors involve trees of hashes. And so if there's a single mistake somewhere in that tree, it's actually literally impossible to find out which area of the tree it's in, because by definition, it's hard to find the pre-images of a hash. So I just wanted to check that the test vectors will include all of the hashes in the trees rather than just the final hash.
We generally haven't in our existing test vectors because we include all of the pre-images. So
right, then that's
so like
enough.
you have the base layer of like, so for example, take the sapling spending key test vectors. We start with the spending key and we just like generate, effectively we do generate like in the chain of hashes from like spending to viewing to whatever, we spell those out. But then like we generally haven't gone like, oh, here's a note, here's the result of, you know, doing it and adding it to the empty tree, here's the anchor, at least at that level. There are Merkle tree test vectors that do that. But like if there's specific cases where you think that would be useful, we could look at that, and particularly for, I think, zip 244, it may make sense to put like intermediates of like the root of the you know, the root of the transparent section, the root of the other section in there. I don't want them to blow up in size, basically, because they're already going to be quite large because of like, you know, proof sizes and so on, end up making them quite funky.
For 244, that definitely makes sense because those are kind of irregular trees with different things at each node. For the Merkle trees, so what I do if I've got a test vector failure is I just modify both implementations to print out all of the intermediates, and it's usually not very difficult to do that.
Yeah, like if we can make it easier, then great. But I'm trying to balance that against like the sheer volume of test vector size that you have to deal with in the parsing case.
As long as there's code that's reasonably separate from the actual implementation, then that should be fine. I guess also on my list of things is we'll want a similar set of test vectors for Fly client because that's been modified. Is that all right?
Yeah, no, that would be fine. The so for that, the implementation there is so that will be in the Zcash history crate has extensive tests within it and prop tests and things, and so the delta to add in that one, we should be able to just use the same infrastructure there to then produce things that will that you can use for that purpose. I forget if we end up putting in. Yeah, I don't think there's a Python implementation of it yet.
No, there isn't. But maybe we should
not
write
in
one.
Not in Hackworks. That would be nice too.
Yeah, if someone wanted to put that together, then that would be really nice bit of logic to pop in there. We've been trying to basically just.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Dodger, if you want to contribute a patch.
I feel like my cryptographic abilities are perfectly suited to designing a hash function where it's easy to find the pre-image. So I've been laughing about that for the past 5 minutes.
I know. I've been cracking up. So
Clicks break my cipher. I just created it.
I mean, we have invented a cipher that has only one key. F4 Jumble.
Related to test vectors, when I created async verifiers for Groth 16, and I'll be doing the same for, it's just a async wrapper around the batch for Halo 2. I use the toy circuits for testing the batching and for testing the async service layer. Is there any chance that we'll get Orchard circuit proofs, Halo 2 proofs, instances that we can test with beyond the toy ones? Because I don't know how, I can't make those. I don't know how to make those yet without literally writing all the rest of the wallet logic that we don't have in Zebra yet.
So which toy circuit are you referring to for sapling?
The
which toy circuit are you referring to?
In Halo 2 crate, the example and like integration test, like really small toy circuits for the Groth. Yeah.
So continue.
Similar to the ones that are in the Groth in Bellman for Groth 16. It's only like a couple.
There are definitely simple examples. I think there's literally an example named simple example.
Those I can use. I'm wondering if there are any proofs that are using the Orchard circuit that would actually be usable as like a test vector as opposed to just the toys.
Not yet.
Okay.
Because it's not fully implemented yet.
Right. Okay.
Well,
we're at the point of having
really good progress actually.
Yeah, we've got the Poseidon, chip, and I think Untitled just finished the Sinsemia chip. So they're both now in review.
Right, cool.
But we've got those in place. So you could take one of those and use those to build like a simple. There's I think in the test vectors of the Poseidon chip PR, there's an example that just like literally takes Poseidon, uses the Poseidon hash function and just takes an input and returns an output. That's more of a complex example that you could use as to put a bit more meat into the circuits you're playing with. And as using pieces that will end up in Orchard.
I'll take a look at that soon and see if I have the spoons to put that test together, or if I'll just
if you by soon you mean like push it out a week or so, that would be great, because we've just improved the APIs and I haven't yet migrated that PR to those APIs. So if you
not in the next week-ish, we're in the middle of a sprint, so definitely not within this sprint.
Cool.
Thank you. All right, very good.
The new API is much nicer. Thank you, Yingtong. Is she on the call?
Honestly, I don't think so, and I kind of hope not, because I know Yingtong was up till 1:30 a.m. at the ZK Proof workshop, so at least 1:30 a.m. So hopefully she's getting a little rest.
Yeah, and she's taken the past week and a half, I think, at this point, 2 weeks of just focusing on that API, because we had done a similar thing early in the Halo 2 crate development phase to like try and figure out something that made sense, and of course it worked perfectly fine for the simple example. The moment you try and do something like Orchard, you start running into the limitations, and so she's really bashed up against that to mold it into shape. So very grateful kudos to her for that.
Right. Okay. Anything else on test plan testing in general? All right. Pool lifecycle.
Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
So there's testnet in the box. We have never spun up testnet in the box. If we / the foundation or any of us do a heterogeneous testnet in the box before testnet, do we want to coordinate deployments to testnet? Because we're modulo someone dies, knock wood, like we are on track for Zebra D Orchard validation on testnet around July 1st. Do we want to coordinate deployments of Zcash nodes to testnet, or do we not care?
To actual testnet, I think it would be nice. We obviously need to coordinate on the testnet activation height. So
for sure.
So that
I'm
is
talking about
because
real testnet.
Testnet is a production quote network. So
right.
So that needs to be agreed upon. But other than that, I don't think there's a need to coordinate on exactly when. Like
okay.
Once we agree on once we're confident that we'll be able to roll it out and get and have the consensus logic in testnet, then that's the point at which we decide on the activation height, and then after that point, it doesn't really matter when you roll it out. Although you will probably want because you will need Zcashd, I think, to be doing I think at that point the generation of blocks, because you would just have validation.
Correct.
Yeah. So obviously, like maybe won't be useful beforehand, but once there's a Zcashd release that does that, then I don't think there's any need for coordination on exactly when you roll out.
Yeah, I would say no matter what, we would probably do like a phase in, step up, not green blue, but basically green blue release or whatever deployment. Like deploy 2 zebras. If they are behaving as expected, deploy some more zebras, etc., etc. And then if something goes wrong, step it back down.
For those who haven't worked in any other business, green blue definition, please.
It's basically, instead of, if you have a wide deployment of servers of some sort of whatever, maybe it's a web application deployment, you deploy percentage of your currently deployed fleet. So if we were deploying to mainnet, there's, I don't know, 600 nodes of Zcash, and if we control them all, we would deploy 6 new versions of Zebra to mainnet, and we would observe them, and we'd have some metrics that say, these are behaving well, and then we deploy some more. We would go from 6 to 12 or 6 to 60 or something like that, continue to observe them. And if they continue, those are blue. I forget which one's blue and which one's green. I'm assuming the tests are blue. And then you keep going and going and going, and you ramp it up by some factor, as long as all of your observed metrics are continuing to pass what you consider to be good, well-behaved application behavior. And then if something goes wrong, you kind of pause, and then you wait and you see if it's continuing to go bad. And if things start getting worse without you changing anything more, then you step it back down. But if you see what's going on and you maybe make a fix or whatever, and then you continue the rollout if it continues to go well. This is contingent on having good telemetry and logging and all of that other stuff.
So that will work really nicely for the peer-to-peer network logic. We still effectively have a step function at the activation height in terms of consensus. So I guess maybe red, blue, green, perhaps.
Yes.
in that system.
It's not one-to-one with a distributed data structure that is the blockchain that needs to be agreed upon by all parties. But in terms of testnet and the peer-to-peer stuff, that works nice, because we want to make sure, we fixed a couple of network things in our network stack. We want to make sure that we're not like going to poison everyone who talks to us if we have if we have an attacker that's like, oh, listen to all of my peers, they're totally legit, and then we broadcast them to everyone. We want to make sure that those things are behaving well. We've been doing that at a small scale by having 2 Zebra nodes running against mainnet, but we're only 2, and there's 600 or so or whatever on mainnet.
The topology just tends to limit how far their influence spreads.
Yep. And they're both in Iowa, so
everything's corn. So Adi asks in the Adi asks, how do you step back down after finding an issue in mainnet? So the answer is, so the kind of step backing down that Deidre is referring to is things like network splits, chain splits, again regarding the consensus rules. That's the kind of thing that the intention is we flush that out on testnet. So so I would entirely expect that, for example, well, we've had this before, for instance, where like we roll something out to testnet, and then we encounter a problem, or an audit goes, actually you need to change this thing, whatever, which changes the consensus rules. So the way in which we address that is, at least in Zcashd, we have logic for rewinding the chain to beyond the 100 blocks by just essentially dropping all state prior to a particular height. And what that lets us do, and we have used that twice before, I think, with testnet. One of the times was to fix a bug, and the other time was because we wanted to make sure that mainnet and testnet used the same sapling parameters, and so we'd rolled out temporary parameters to testnet, and then we rolled back testnet so that it could be deployed with the same parameters as mainnet, just to make everyone's lives easier.
There was another reason for that, though. We'd got the endianness wrong between the spec and the implementation.
There was that bug as well, but I think we would have rolled back testnet anyway, because the testnet parameters just used like ones generated on Sean's laptop, I think, whereas and then if we had done that and left it, ignoring the internet problem, we would have then had to have 2 sets of 50 megabyte sapling parameters, which would have not been fun at all.
That wasn't
yeah.
We don't have that problem anymore because no trusted setups. Yay!
But yeah,
Zebra also has a rollback strategy. We just delete the cache state and start again from Genesis. No, I mean, that's how we do our data format upgrade.
That's such a better way to do it.
Roll back.
Takes 3 hours.
A roll over and die back.
It's fine. It's fine. What's another few hours?
Right.
I mean, if it's 3 versus 10, that is a very viable strategy.
Right. All right. The last
I'm
item.
getting tired now.
Yeah, I was going to say we're last item is pool lifecycle. No update from us on that. Nate's kind of on point for driving that discussion, reaching consensus around what makes sense for everyone, and he's on PTO today, couldn't join us, so it's good to have no update right when we're coming up on time. So anyway, yeah, so I think that's the list. Great discussion as always. These have been some really great calls. I really like the every 2-week cycle too. That seems to be the right cadence. Just kind of works out well. Everything's still fresh from the last call. You're not kind of remembering what was it we talked about last time, but yeah, so I think it's going pretty well. Okay, anyone have anything else before we close the call out?
A question that was covered earlier, but I was in the car, so I didn't get to ask it. Where will the science review be published? In the Orchard book, Halo 2 book, somewhere else?
So I think Sean's dropped off at this point. So the Halo 2 formalism will be in the Halo 2 book. The review of it will just be, I think, a separate PDF that a separate report,
which will probably be linked from the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll get hosted like we've hosted the previous audit reports, like we had NCC and CoinSpect and people who've done things before. They end up getting hosted somewhere on a website. I think normally they're just in the past we've just, because we published we announced the results in blogs. I think they just end up getting hosted in the what is now the ECC website, but we can find another place to put them. And in any case, they'll get referenced from the book.
Good, cool, thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, look, thanks everyone.
One thing I just want to say is, I know I was kind of raising issues earlier, and it may have come across as being a little bit critical or negative, but I do want to say that we are super positive and excited about this whole initiative, and we think unified addresses are an awesome idea, and please do not interpret any kind of nitpicking that we engage in as overall opposition to any of this stuff. We think ECC did an absolutely great job, and we're looking forward to pushing forward as a kind of partners in the future when Zebra is actually up and running and being used on mainnet.
Yep. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, and one, thank you for that. I don't think we took it any kind of way at all. It's positive, constructive feedback. It's awesome. I mean, like Strad was saying, like some of the things you're kind of pointing out, when we have, another node, then maybe it doesn't work so well. It kind of doesn't work so well sometimes for just one node. So it's great feedback. We appreciate it. And we're looking forward to Zebra being online and working together, and looking forward to the NUP discussion at ZCon. Nate tapped me to kind of help out with that, so I'm looking forward to that. That'll be my first ZCon. It's virtual, but it'll be my first one. I'm pretty excited. So anyway, well, look, thanks everyone. Great discussion as always, and everyone, hope you have a good rest of the week. Great weekend, and we'll catch up in Discord. So talk to you later.
Bye.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.